God'll get you for that one.
Maude is owned by Shout Factory.
God'll Get You for That, Walter is produced for entertainment purposes only.
Sponsored in part by Findlay's Friendly Appliances. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of God'll Get You for That, Walter.
He will.
He will.
But not this episode.
Not technically.
Well, sort of,
Technically,
yeah. Sort of.
We'll get it on technicality.
You're right.
And welcome to God'll Get You for That, Walter, a podcast where we discuss the 1970s hit sitcom, Maude. And I am your host, Tom Catt, and I am joined by the ever so lovely, the ever so divine, the ever so old, Toni Homeperm.
Yep. we feel old after this weekend.
Oh, man.
We feel old after this weekend.
I have never felt older in my life.
Shall we share?
Sure, why not? Yes. This past weekend, we were at Babylon Pride on the Long Islands. And after Babylon... The Long Islands.
There's more than one?
There's three.
Oh, okay.
And after which, the Babylon Pride, we then went to Sayville Pride.
Yes.
We went to Station Pub for shows and laughs. And boy, howdy, by 10:30, we were just gone.
We were wiped out.
We were wiped clean.
Yes.
Don't know how the other queens managed,
I don't know.
God bless them.
God bless them. So, so it was an eventful but tiring weekend.
An eventful but tiring, yes. And today we are discussing, this is our episode 57, we are going to be addressing season 3, episode 9, The Last Tango in Tuckahoe.
I love that word, Tuckahoe.
Oh, yes, Tuckahoe.
Love it.
It's a fabulous little town, fabulous little hamlet in Westchester, New York.
Okay.
Trust me, I've wanted to go as Maude, but just the train tickets alone is
really true.
And it aired originally on November 11th, 1974, and of course we watched this on the streaming service Tubi, which still has seasons 3 and 4.
Yes.
The episode was directed by Hal Cooper, written by Bob Schiller, Bob Weisskopf, and of course Roman Lear. And we have some guest stars. We have Alfie Freddy, played by James Cromwell.
Yes, and he's an Academy Award winner, isn't
he? Yes, he is.
Yes. But doing a really, really crappy British accent.
Very, very...
That British accent was terrible.
Left a little to be desired.
Yeah.
But also, let's think about it from the perspective of Mrs. Naugatuck. I'm sure that it was an act.
Yes, right. She probably told them, pretend to be British.
We also had another guest star whose name escapes me, but he was
Eddie
the dry cleaner.
Yes.
Eddie the dry cleaner. I'm going to see if I can quickly find his name quick.
Well, I will set the scene while you're looking at that. So, Walter's in the kitchen.
Oh, Eddie Carroll.
Eddie Carroll, that was
Eddie
easy.
Carroll is Eddie.
See?
And yes, James Cromwell
It's like me and the Kyleson Chronicles. Who do
I
play? I play Toni.
You play Toni Homeperm.
I play Toni Homeperm.
And James Cromwell, God bless him, is still alive.
Yes.
He's still going strong.
So, Walter's in the kitchen. Mrs. Naugatuck comes in and she's singing I Could Have Danced All Night.
Yeah.
And Walter's asking her, who made this lousy coffee?
And Mrs. Naugatuck says, I did. Which is why we British always drink tea.
They drink tea. And Walter tells her to enjoy her day off.
And she says, ta-ta.
And then Carol comes in, and she's asking Walter, what's wrong with Mother? All she does is, she just stares and says
and shakes her head no.
Yeah.
So Walter quips that it may have been the coffee that Maude drank.
Right.
So, I think at that point, Carol exits the...
Well, she says she's got to drive up to Albany.
Yeah, she has to drive up to Albany to pick up Philip.
And he's staying with his father. This is the first time we've ever heard about.
We don't meet him physically until the last season.
Really?
We do not meet Carol's husband until the last season. And we actually find out that he's a con man.
Oh,
interesting. Yeah. He's not... He is a loathsome character.
Oh,
but
Carol.
Spoilers. But we'll find out about that at season 6.
Yes.
We're still in season 3. We're not even at the halfway mark yet, kids.
Yeah.
So Carol goes to exit, and she's wearing this very stylish outfit. It's a skirt, a blouse, and a beautiful pea coat.
And that hat.
And the cloche-style hat with a feather on it. And she goes to leave, and as Maude comes downstairs, Carol says, "Mother, I'm leaving."
Right,
and Maude goes, "I don't speak to strangers.
I don't speak to strangers. You're a stranger.
You're a stranger in a strange house."
And Carol is, her voice is getting loud, and Maude was telling her to keep your voice down, stranger. And, Carol is, like, pressing her. What's the problem?
What's the problem?
And Maude says to her, what was a man doing in your room?
And Carol says, a man in my room, I should be so lucky.
Right.
We should all be so lucky.
Exactly.
Have you ever snuck anybody into your house?
No.
Okay.
No.
Neither have I.
No. Never tried. So Maude is telling her, don't lie to me. I heard laughter, and it wasn't Walter.
It wasn't Walter.
Yes.
Walter does many things in the bedroom. Giggling is not one of them. He hasn't giggled since he turned 50. Not since he turned 50.
Not since he turned 50.
But she said she distinctly heard a man's laughter at 12:30, 3, and at 4:17.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
throughout the whole night. She heard this man laughing, and Carol insists she must have been dreaming.
Yep.
And Maude tells her, if I was dreaming about
a man coming into my room,
being snuck in, it would have been in her room
and not yours.
So I could sympathize with that.
Same.
Yes.
And then I think at that point Carol says, well, maybe you're just becoming senile.
Yes.
And Maude says, Carol, I only hope I live long enough to become a burden to you.
Become a burden. Yes.
Speaking of burdens. The next thing I have written down is no man in her room.
Right. And
Carol's also being very like, Mother, you know me. I'm your daughter. Yeah, I'm not letting anybody into my room.
I'm not gonna.
Because there was that whole episode with Chris, where Carol was trying to convince Chris to stay in her room, and that did not go over well. And they both agreed that there would just not be any man in her room.
Right. Yes.
So, Maude says, oh, well, you're my daughter, and so on and so forth. Big hugs and kisses, and then she says, just don't let it happen again.
And Carol's now like,
she's getting a little irate.
A crazy house. Which,
have you met my mother? She's crazy.
Yeah. Yes. So she leaves. And Maude is saying, I love her, but there was definitely a man in her room.
And Walter turns to her and says,
well, she says, Walter, what should we do about it?
And what does he say?
He says we should raise her rent.
And then Maude starts playing
with his hair.
With his hair, saying, Walter, there is a God.
Yes.
And he is very capable of getting you.
Yes.
So if by chance he's flying over Tuckahoe, watch out and be careful.
That's right.
It was too funny. It was very, very funny.
And then the doorbell rings.
Yes.
And Maude immediately thinks that it's Carol coming back.
Leaps to her feet.
To apologize.
And she says, I forgive you, I forgive you. And she opens the door, and it's Eddie, the dry cleaner, holding, I guess, either one of Mrs. Naugatuck's garments or one of Maude's.
No, I think that was her guest's garment. Didn't he say it was the Duchess of Naugatuck's guest's garment?
Yes, it was the Duchess of Naugatuck's guest's garment. And they broke all the buttons. So here's where we start to find out the plot of the episode, where Mrs. Naugatuck just enjoys stretching the truth.
Yes.
Bending it over backwards, one would say.
Calling her, saying that she's the Duchess of Naugatuck.
Yep, calling her the Duchess of Naugatuck. Which is where I got the Duchess of Homeperm for you.
Thank you. And then he says she told him the whole story. She's descended from Henry VIII.
Yep. And Maude says, well, she does bear a striking resemblance to Charles Lawton. Which I thought that tickled me.
Excuse me. So Maude wants to know how much she owes Eddie for the dry cleaning.
And Eddie says no charge. And, Maude's a little taken aback. Right. And she goes, Eddie, no charge?
Yeah.
And, Eddie then says, well, she promised to give us a signed picture of her and the Queen Mother.
Queen Mother, yes.
And Maude then says, well, if you're giving it to her for free, I'll give you a signed picture of me.
Yeah.
And he says, doing what?
Doing what?
And, that could be taken a number of interesting ways.
True.
And then Maude says, at your prices, you name it, and I'll do it.
I'll do it.
He thinks about it for a moment.
And he says no.
And then she slams the door in his face.
So Maude says, excuse me, to Walter, we have to do something about her stories.
Yes, because she is telling everybody a different story about how she came to be. We found out, I think she said that she was the illegitimate child of Eddie Cantor, and who else?
Oh, I can't remember now.
I can't remember either.
Was it a royal? It was
It was definitely a royal.
Yes.
Maybe it was Queen Victoria and Eddie Cantor.
Something like that, yes.
Eddie Cantor.
Eddie Cantor. So Maude says now that she has her dry cleaning, she sees this as an opportunity to go and bring it to her room.
Yes.
And Walter's like, she said she doesn't want us to go in her room.
Nope. And Maude says, have you ever seen me snoop? Walter says, no. And she says, well, follow me.
Yeah, I'll show you how I snoop.
So they go upstairs. And actually, even before that, Maude says she's out all day shopping and lying. So obviously, we know that Maude is onto her schemes.
Yes. So
they go upstairs to her room, and this is the first time that we're actually getting a view into Mrs. Naugatuck's abode.
Yes.
So she says, Walter's like, I've never been in her room before. And
right.
Maude says, Walter, you're going to love it. It's like you're in London.
It's like you're in England.
It's like you're in England. Except she has everything in there but Big Ben.
And then the
bell
gongs
rings.
go off.
The bell gongs go off. She says, of course, I haven't been in there since yesterday.
So they go in, and it's like the UK has exploded over the room.
Yes, there's pictures of the Queen Mother. There's a picture of a portrait of Humphrey Bogart.
A life preserver from the
Titanic.
Yes, and was it Maude who commented that it looks like an indoor flea market?
Yep. Walter said it's an indoor flea market, and then Walter points out the lifesaver from the Titanic, and Maude says she was a bee girl.
Yes, a bee girl
on
on
the Titanic. I have written down Shoemaker did.
I have Ducks, I'll Always Love You.
Yes, Ducks, I'll Always Love You, and then it's a picture of her and Winston Churchill.
Yes. But they're saying it's got to be a fake because he's in the uniform of a Royal Canadian
Mounted Police.
Yes.
So, just more stories and delusions from the Duchess of Naugatuck.
Naugatuck. Yes. So Maude goes to put the
outfit
dry cleaning
in the closet.
She opens the closet,
and there is a man.
We see
the
these bare legs,
like
on the bottom,
and this bowl cut hairdo.
Yes,
and that's all that we see.
Yes, we don't see,
and we are led to believe that this man is in the buff.
Yes, very true.
So there's a bit of physical comedy where Maude just stares. She just
has that look.
Just has that look on her face, and she closes the door. She rubs her nose and she says, "Walter, I want you to take a look in the closet." So,
Walter's like, what do you want me to look? And she's just like, look!
Just look in the closet. So he opens the door, and again, it's the same physical comedy where you're looking down, and the camera pans down to the legs and then pans to the hairdo. And I think he closes the door, and Walter says it's Big Ben himself.
Yeah.
Which I thought...
Yes.
Oh.
And Walter says there's got to be a simple explanation. And Maude says, yeah, sure, everybody's got to be someplace. So, Walter says a guy from...
must have snuck in from Carol's room.
Yes, the guy from Carol's room must have snuck in. And that's because they're thinking there's no way this can't be Mrs. Naugatuck. A naked guy would be in Mrs. Naugatuck's room.
And that was something I really appreciated about Maude, was that they didn't shy away from admitting and acknowledging that older people do still have sex.
Right.
And still have an active love life.
Exactly.
Just because the pilot lights out doesn't mean the pilot lights out.
That's right.
And, that was definitely something that was expressed in the Golden Girls as well. Because I think Mrs. Naugatuck was 70-something. I think she was 70-something, and also her then husband, Bert, we were introduced to him, I think, later in the season. They get married. Right. Obviously, like it's pointed out, that they're an older couple, and that they're still sexually active.
Yes. So, Maude tells Walter to do something. So Walter goes back to the closet, opens it, and says, "Good morning." And the audience was hysterical.
Of course.
And he says, "I don't wish to be rude. But what are you doing in the closet?" And he says, "Well, everybody's got to be someplace." And Walter's like, "Well, I guess that is a simple explanation."
And then I think at that point...
that's when Mrs. Naugatuck comes in.
Mrs. Naugatuck enters, and she is furious.
Yeah, she's like, well, the cheek of it.
Yes. Look, coming in here acting like a couple of bloody burglars.
And Maude is insistent on Mrs. Naugatuck telling her who is that man.
And Mrs. Naugatuck says, it is none of your business.
Right.
That's who that man is.
Yes. She says, sorry, Alfie, stay where you are.
And then I think at that point...
And she's telling her, madam, you need to leave my room.
Yes.
And, she wants an explanation.
Yep.
Mrs. Naugatuck just wants them out.
Yep.
And that's when Maude decides to take matters into her own hands.
She always does.
Of course, she goes to the closet and she says,
what's it all about, Alfie?
mm-hmm.
And just the camera zooms in on her very angry-looking face.
Yes. And Mrs. Naugatuck gives them 5 seconds to clear out of her room.
And she calls them 2 trespassers.
Yes.
You have 5 seconds to get out of here, you 2 trespassers.
Yeah.
1,
2,
2, 5.
Yes.
Also, one of the things that I really enjoy pointing out, and, this is me self-aggrandizing myself, but this was one of the episodes where I was looking very intently at Maude, and I said to myself, that's my face. I have made those faces. And, late last week, I had a private gig where I was B. Arthur for a 1-year-old's birthday party. And I ended up saying to my darling sweet mother over here that it's just getting worse and worse, where every time I do my makeup like B, I continue to look like her. And he goes, you're going to look like her until, you're going to age and you're going to look like her.
Yes.
And he pats me on the shoulder and says, that's job security,
Job security,
Tom. And I'm
honey.
like, this is where we're at.
It's
is where we're at,
just,
friends.
think about it. It's like, if you were young, if you were, doing somebody who is young and beautiful, the more you age, less time you have to do it.
I'm going to be looking like an old woman until I too am an old woman.
You really are an old woman. Exactly. I mean, job security.
And that is exactly what it is. It's job
Don't mock
security.
it. Don't mock
it. I'm absolutely not. If B. Arthur pays my bills, so be it.
So Maude is insisting that this is my home.
Yep. And Mrs. Naugatuck is insisting it may be your home, but this is my room.
And she pushes them out of the room.
Yep. And at that point, the one thing that was really sort of, I don't know, maybe the writers were just leaning a little too heavily onto this shtick, but there were moments when Mrs. Naugatuck would tell Maude off, and Maude would be like, Walter, do something, as if Maude is incapable of telling Mrs. Naugatuck where to go.
Yeah, because, she would anyway.
She would anyway, exactly.
Because Walter wouldn't do it right, or to her,
or to Maude's liking.
To her liking, and yeah.
So, Maude is like, Walter, she just kicked us out of her room. And Walter's stunned. He's like, what I can't believe is how easily she did it.
Right. Yes, and Maude is saying that, she's got a lot of nerve.
Yeah.
She's demanding to know who's in that closet.
She bangs on the door and she says, Mrs. Naugatuck, I demand to know what that man was doing in your closet. And Mrs. Naugatuck says, beats me. When I left, I told him to stay under the bed.
Yes.
And I remember watching this episode, and the look on Hermione Badley's face as she slams the door in Maude and Walter's. It made me laugh so loud. So
Walter,
I think at that point we have a commercial.
Yes,
and
right.
Then, we have a commercial, and then when we come back, Maude and Walter are downstairs. They're in the living room, and Walter's saying maybe this is an innocent relationship, and that's when they say not at her age.
Right, they're like couldn't be
at her age.
And Maude says that's what Carol thinks about me.
Yes, there was a lot of laughter on that one. Would you like me to get you a bottle of water?
No, I'm good.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay.
So, Walter is saying, well, you said you wanted sleep-in help.
And Maude says, right, but that doesn't mean that she gets to get sleep-in help.
Right.
That doesn't give her the right to get to sleep-in help.
Yes. So Mrs. Naugatuck, I believe, comes down.
Yep, she comes downstairs, very elegantly attired, and I loved her shoes. They were a nice chunky slingback.
Yes. And she wants a word. And she's demanding an apology.
And Maude is incensed. You're supposed to be apologizing to me. I demand the apology. And I think at that point she turns to Walter and says, I think Mrs. Naugatuck was almost demanding Walter tell Maude to give her an apology.
Right. Didn't she say something about Maude making
Her guests feel ill at
in
ease.
her closet
yeah.
feel ill at ease?
And, I think at that point Walter says, that's hard to deny, Maude.
Yes.
And I think that was when Mrs. Naugatuck again turned to Walter and said, I would like an apology for you being in my room. And, I think Walter blames Maude, or Mrs. Naugatuck says something about Maude being the ringleader.
Yes. She's not blaming Walter. She's only blaming Maude.
Yes.
Because she knows Maude is the ringleader.
Was the ringleader.
Which, she was right.
Yep. And again, I think Walter says that's hard to deny.
Yeah. And she wants her apology.
And Maude says, I'll give you an apology when hell freezes over.
Hell freezes over.
And Mrs. Naugatuck, I think, says, which is another thing, I want to talk to you about the heat in my room.
I want to complain about the heat in her room.
And Maude says, it seemed to be hot enough last night.
Yes.
And the audience lost.
Yes.
The audience definitely lost.
And Mrs. Naugatuck accuses her of having a dirty mind.
You know what your problem is? You've got a dirty mind.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Maude turns to Walter and says, Walter!
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Walter says, that's even harder to deny.
Yes. Pardon me.
You're quite
it's my allergies.
The allergies.
They're really bad today.
They are bad today.
So, I think...
At that point, Maude says, you want to know what I love about you, Walter?
Nothing.
Walter says, what? She goes, nothing.
Right.
And he says, this is me leaving.
Leaving. And he leaves.
And he exits.
Yes.
He exits out the front door, actually.
Yes. And Maude is asking Mrs. Naugatuck, what were you doing in your room all night? And Mrs. Naugatuck says he wasn't in the room
all night. He snuck in well past midnight.
Yes.
So then I think she starts going into this.
She waxes poetically.
She waxes so poetically.
With this Shakespearean poetry.
What she thinks is
Shakespearean poetry.
And, she's like, this homeland, this England.
This England.
William Shakespeare.
Yeah, and Maude
says, Balzac, Mrs. Naugatuck.
Yes. And she says, you British are all alike.
When the jig is up, you start going into this poetic Shakespeare nonsense.
Yes. And I have something about Mrs. Naugatuck saying something about oysters and stew.
Yes. Something about oysters and stew, and then Maude says, you keep my oysters out of this.
Right. And Maude is insisting she has every reason to be furious.
Yep.
And then Mrs. Naugatuck says...
They actually exit into the kitchen, into the dining room. And,
into the kitchen.
Into the kitchen. And, Mrs. Naugatuck says, would you believe me if I told you that Alfie is my nephew, and that he came over here late last night from Lord knows where?
Yes.
And Maude stops and says, well, yes, I would believe you. And then Mrs. Naugatuck says, well, then Alfie is my nephew.
And, Maude is saying, I think she was saying that this is ridiculous.
Yes.
And then Mrs. N starts doing something, and Maude
she goes to the kitchen. She goes into the refrigerator and pulls out cold cuts and a loaf of bread.
Right.
And she says, "I'm making my nephew a sandwich. You can take it out to Miss Everin's pay."
Yeah, making a sandwich for Alfie. Now at this point, Maude starts recounting Mrs. N's tales.
Yes, she owned a bawdy house in Austin, in Australia. She was a drag racer in Burma, and when she was born, she was suckled by a wolf in Tanganyika.
Yes, right.
And Mrs. Naugatuck says, "Well, sure, it beats having the story of being a housewife.
Beats the hell out of being a housewife.
Beats the hell out of being a housewife." Which, honestly, yes,
yeah. And Maude is just kind of like
she's fed up.
She's like she can't believe this.
She says, you are incapable of telling the truth, and then you tell me that your nephew is from Chipping Camden. And that at that point, Mrs. Naugatuck says he's from Chipping Camden, the tallest pro-tango dancer.
Yes.
And I think she says these are three truths.
Yes.
From Chipping Camden, the tallest pro-tango dancer. What was the other one?
He's her nephew.
And that he's her nephew.
He's her nephew. He's the tallest pro-tango dancer, and he's from Chipping Camden.
Chipping Camden.
And then she yells, "Freddie, bring down the music."
And Maude turns to Mrs. Naugatuck and says, Freddie, you said his name was
Alfie.
And of course, Mrs. Naugatuck says, yes, Alfie Freddie.
Alfie Freddie. It's a common English name.
It's a very common English
name. Alfie Freddie, yes.
I too would like to be called Alfie Freddy.
Yes, I will. I'll call you Alfie Freddy from now on.
So, thank you.
So Mrs. Naugatuck is you know,
They
I don't
both-
care
they
if you
both-
don't believe me. I believe me.
Yes, I believe me.
So Alfie Freddy comes down,
Yep.
and Mrs. Naugatuck says, I'm going to prove to you he's a tango dancer.
Yes.
Then Alfie Freddy puts a fake mustache on,
Yes.
and Mrs. Naugatuck grabs a rose,
Yep.
and they
It
start
says,
playing.
"Olé!"
Right, they start playing the tango music.
They start playing the tango music, which is I Get Ideas.
Mm-hmm.
They were playing I Get Ideas as a tango waltz.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, they're having this, like, interesting tango. And then at one point, Alfie lifts up Mrs. Naugatuck
Yes,
clear
completely
off
off
the
the
ground. Completely off the ground. And, you know, Maude is agog. She is aghast. And I think at some point, Walter enters and is seeing this spectacle. And at the very end, you know, Alfie Freddy brings Mrs. Naugatuck very down low to the ground, and she's skipping, like, I can't even think of the maneuver that it would be called, but Mrs. Naugatuck's legs are sliding outward into this final pose.
Right.
And, you know, at that point, Alfie lifts back up.
Right.
And Mrs. Naugatuck goes to Maude and says,
And
How
she's nose to nose with her.
she says, I want to make sure I'm nose to nose with you, and I'll tell you. How do you like them apples? And the audience erupts in laughter and applause.
And she says she's going upstairs to pack.
Yep. Because she has had it.
Yes.
You know, this episode really brings into question the veracity of an employee's tales. I mean, have you ever told little white lies that caught up to you?
I don't think so.
I have.
Oh. I've worked with people that it was like, you know, everything was like, you find out, it's like it's all a tissue of lies.
Yes.
So
Tissue of lies.
A tissue of lies, yes. You know?
Easily terrible, and they dissolve in the water.
So Alfie says he apologizes and that he would have put his skivvies on if they knew they were going to barge in.
Yes, I had to put my skivvies on.
Yes.
And Walter says, our closet is your closet.
And Alfie's then telling them that he has to go because his boat sails at 3.
And Ward says, you're a sailor.
You're a sailor.
And he says, no, I'm a tango instructor on a cruise ship.
Right.
And Maude is like, I don't know what to believe anymore. And Alfie's trying to reason with him, say, try believing what she believes.
Yeah. Well, Maude asks him, she said, Mr. Freddy, are you really her nephew?
Yes.
And he says, if that's what she told you, then I am.
Then I am.
He said, believe what you believe.
Try believing what she believes.
Yes.
He also mentioned something about her dreams and her illusions.
Yes.
How they're not hurting anyone.
She doesn't have a soul in the world.
And
she's not hurting anyone.
Nope.
So if she wants to say she's the Duchess of Naugatuck, then
let her say she's the Duchess of
let her
Naugatuck.
say.
And he mentions the Duke, and he says, "Well, that would make him my uncle."
Yes.
And he frowns knowingly, and it's like, okay, maybe that is my uncle.
Yeah. And apparently he was lost in a fox hunt.
Lost in a fox hunt. Never saw the ruddy bird again.
Right.
And he says, well, must be off. Cheery bye.
Cheery bye. Yes, and we have to say that, you know, his British accent was terrible.
Left little to be desired.
So, I mean, and I'm curious, was it, like, deliberate?
I mean, it definitely is an interesting question to be asked. Like, was it intentional that his accent be terrible? Was it... It could be played any which way you want it to. But I'm going to err on the side of that this person was here to have a tryst with Mrs. Naugatuck, that they got caught, and that Mrs. Naugatuck said, you're going to be my nephew, put on, like, dummy up and put on a thick British accent.
Tell them you're British.
Yep.
Alfie Freddy, whatever your name is.
Alfie Freddy, whatever your bloody name is.
So he leaves.
He leaves, and we cut to Mrs. Naugatuck.
No, well, Maude is saying that what she did was inexcusable.
Oh, yes, it was inexcusable.
And she has to apologize. She wants to apologize.
Yep.
So then we see Mrs. Naugatuck in her room packing, and she's crying.
Yep.
And then we hear Maude is knocking on the door from the outside.
Yes.
asking her if she can come in.
And she says, no.
No. And I think Maude just opens the door.
Maude just opens the door and enters anyway.
And she says she wants to apologize.
And Mrs. Naugatuck says, you're too late.
Too late.
You had your chance and you bungled it.
I wouldn't care if you were down on your hands and knees.
Are you sure you don't want me to get you a bottle of water, Mary?
I'm good.
Are you sure? Because you sound like you're dying.
I am, but it's fine. I've died many times before. I just keep coming back.
That's fair. I've seen you say.
And she says, something about her doubting the veracity of her leaving.
Anyone who doubts my veracity doesn't want me around, so
Right.
I'm going.
Right. And Maude says that she doesn't want her. She says, I don't want you to leave.
And she says, then I'll stay. With a big smile on her face.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like the one beautiful thing about Hermione Baddeley is that she is just such a gifted actress that she could be incredibly sensitive and incredibly sensitive and incredibly knowing, and then just there's something so brilliant about that actress.
Yes.
When it comes to her timing and her comedy.
But she has a condition for her staying.
Yes.
No flack about overnight
if she has guests.
Right.
And, at that point, I think she says, sometimes I have lapses in memory.
Right.
But,
Yes.
I think at that point, they hug, and Maude calls her the Duchess, and, Mrs. Naugatuck smiles and, gasps, surprised, oh, you've heard.
And
I think the next thing I have written down is that, she mentions the Duke and how he went down with the Titanic.
Right.
And
Maude says,
Alfie said that he was lost during a fox hunt.
Right.
And, Mrs. Naugatuck is, falling over her words. And Maude says, no, don't tell me. The fox hunt was held on the Titanic. And, Mrs. Naugatuck says, yes, he always liked to travel first class.
Yes.
And then we have the prologue where Maude is walking upstairs, assuming towards her bedroom. And, she hears, I Get Ideas, the tango music playing.
Right.
And she's, banging on the door saying, Mrs. Naugatuck, Mrs. Naugatuck, Mrs. Naugatuck. And, Mrs. Naugatuck opens the door and she's Maude barges in.
As Maude will do.
As Maude does. And she says, I distinctly heard tango music, and I always know that it takes two to tango. And she races over to the closet door, opens it, and who does she say?
Walter. That was a surprise to everybody.
That was a surprise to everybody. Yeah. So, I think at that point, I think Walter says, I'm taking lessons. And then Maude and Walter start doing a tango.
Right.
And Maude is rubbing his back, saying, I never knew that I would be married to a closet tango dancer.
I know. My lord.
It really was an interesting episode.
Yes, it was.
It was definitely an interesting episode, to say the least. But again, I think it was one of those Mrs. Naugatuck-centric episodes where we're focusing more on... Because, honestly, where could the writers take... The writers could take the character anywhere if she was given the opportunity to lie as much as she did.
Yeah.
So, it was definitely one for the theologians.
Definitely
not even in my top 50.
Of episodes.
Of episodes.
Yeah.
It was definitely definitely one that you watch while you're watching this the series in succession.
Right. It's not one if or I want to watch one of my favorites.
This is not one where I'm I'm gonna watch this one because it's silly.
Right. Yes.
And there are definitely episodes, that are more geared towards the fantastical. But again, as I've mentioned before, seasons 1 and seasons 2 were definitely more politically geared.
Oh yeah.
And they were definitely written with the intent of being
inflammatory.
SAT
word.
There you go. Whereas with seasons 3 and 4, they were leaning a little bit more into the cartoony, into the more situation comedy than anything else. So,
well, unfortunately, I think what happens too is when a show gets more popular, that then they sort of want to they don't want to rock the boat as much.
No,
So
they don't.
You know, a lot of times that happens.
Yes,
A lot of series. With a lot of series.
That was
When
definitely the case with
You
this
know,
one.
when they get a little more, as the popularity of the show is growing, you know, when a show is new, you know, they don't know how long it's going to go. Will it last? You know, so we can be a little more riskier.
Yeah.
And, you know, then it's sort of like, it's doing well, but we don't want to rock the boat as much. So.
Yeah. So, there's definitely an overarching, like, in seasons 1 and 2, it was definitely very heavily politicized. Then in, like, seasons 3 and 4, it became a little cartoony.
Yeah.
Then by, like, seasons 5 and 6, it became a little bit more politicized and political.
But they never went as deep as season 1, like with Maude's Dilemma.
Absolutely not.
So.
Like, that, honestly, Maude's Dilemma could definitely be viewed as, like, a standalone.
Yeah.
Like, even outside of the Maude mythos, you can watch that and it'd still be very much outside of... Yeah. Definitely interesting.
You know, we still get, like, comments about
we're always going to get comments
every
on that episode.
once in a blue moon.
There were some people that were like, this is indoctrination, this, and it's like, it really isn't, though. There really should be, you know, I wish that they would re-air Maude's Dilemma. I would want them to re-air Maude's Dilemma. I would love for Norman Lear to do a Maude Live where they go over that episode, but I know that's...
Yeah.
You can't do that these days, unfortunately.
No, it's
which was one of the reasons why I wanted to do it.
Yes. But your cast was iffy about it, right?
Not the only one that was iffy about it was my Vivian.
Oh.
And the reason my Vivian was so iffy about it was because she did not want, and I think it was a career move for her.
Uh-huh.
And I think that if we had done Maude's Dilemma, she would have either left the production or just would have been like, she would not have promoted it nearly as much. At least that is not, this isn't the assuming, and of course you know when you assume it makes an ass out of you and me.
Of course.
But it could stand to reason that was one of the reasons why she was not wanting to do that episode. Right. Because that is definitely, I mean, that's also very, I can appreciate that. I can appreciate her making that as a career move. Right. Because still to this day, it's a very hard-hitting episode. Yeah. And the fact that, you know, I don't know why I was on Reddit last night. Oh, no. But I was on Reddit and I was, like, looking in the politics subreddit and just reading all the comments about how June is the Supreme Court's, like, what did they call it? June of Doom? The June of Doom, where, like, the Supreme Court is going to make their final decisions on the state of Roe v. Wade. Right. And, you know, just reading a lot of the comments and, you know, people making comments about how how Justice Thomas should be kicked off for his connection with his wife Ginny. Right. And how Salito and Thomas were just, it's all bad. Yeah. It's all bad. It is. And, you know, the other problem is when Trump was in office, and even when Bush Jr. was in office, they packed the courts with conservative judges. Yeah. And it's that is where the pain in the ass really is. Yeah. And, you know, this was one of the reasons why so many people were nervous and why so many people were afraid when Trump won in 2016, because we all knew what he was going to do. Well,
that was always my feeling. It was like, the problem is who you elect president, you're going to determine who gets on the Supreme Court. Yes. See, that's the issue. It really is. More so than anything. More so than anything else. That they actually do in office.
The only thing a president really does is he just signs paperwork. Yeah. That's all the president does, is sign paperwork. But sign paperwork and then send people to war.
The power they really have is who they appoint to the Supreme Court.
They appoint to the Supreme Court.
That's the real crux of it.
That's the power.
People don't understand that.
Nope. They really don't.
So that's what, you know, I knew was going to be the issue.
I think the other thing that like really got under my skin was when Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed,
Yeah.
and they were.
I know they like rushed that justice on.
That really was
something
I was not okay with.
Yeah,
and the fact that there weren't.
It was like she wasn't even cold in her grave.
Were there protests about
I'm sure
them?
there were. I'm sure there were.
It was one of those moments in time where I'm like, you bastards. Mm-hmm. How dare you pull this when just the hypocrisy of it all really is bothersome. And again, that is definitely like the hypocrisy is definitely something that is a focal point in several episodes of Maude. Mm-hmm. And, seeing the juxtaposition between the Democrats and the Republicans, specifically when it comes to, Walter and, when it comes to Arthur and Maude, it's just one of those very interesting things politically where you have to just watch and be careful. And, what was I reading recently? I got an advertisement on Facebook for Suffolk County GOP saying elect Vinnie Paleo. Uh-huh. And I'm like, cause why? Because he's a Trump conservative?
Oh,
no.
No thanks. Whenever I see those things, I report them as being like, sexually,
sexually.
And you know what I just saw?
What did you just saw?
I wonder if it's even here. No, I don't know where it is.
But
then we had Buffalo, we had Uvalde, we had Philadelphia. There were others this weekend. I just saw some Texas lawmaker. Now they just had that.
They just recently had
in Uvalde. He's trying to make it illegal for kids to go to a drag show.
So absurd. Absurd.
Are you kidding me? That's what you worried
about?
I don't ever remember kids ever getting shot at a drag show.
Never.
And we have to preface this that if we do perform for like all ages, we know how to keep it clean.
As clean as possible. As clean as a drag queen can keep it clean. Yeah. And that's not a lot. Listen, there's drag queen story hours. There's...
Right.
Look at our friend Bella.
Yes.
Look at our friend Bella.
Yes.
She gets the brunt of a lot of hatred.
A lot.
For her one episode that she did with Desmond is Amazing.
Yes.
And just, it's really, really bothersome how people will use their religion to sort of be a sword and shield for them. Like, you, what you're doing goes against God. What you're doing, you're taking advantage of. We're not taking advantage of anybody.
No.
We're not taking advantage of anyone. If a person wants to bring their child to a drag show, and I think they came up with a really awful name for the event. It was called Drag the Kids to something with drag and kids,
right?
Like drag kids to such and such,
right?
Or drag the kids to this show, or whatever it was, and they're saying that guns are not as dangerous as drag queens?
Right.
What?
Drag queens are more dangerous than
drag
guns.
queens are more dangerous than guns. Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have really thunk it?
Right. There's been a few times where I've been out.
Give Texas back to Mexico.
Really?
At this point, just give Texas back to Mexico.
I know.
I'm tired.
I know.
This is it's so absurd. It's so absurd.
I actually did a show a couple years back with Bella.
Mm-hmm.
We were asked to do a thing for this camp.
Mm-hmm.
It was out on Shelter Island. What an experience that was. You drive all the way out east on Long Island, and then take a ferry.
Yeah.
And we did this drag show, this little drag show for these kids at camp. They were, I think, like average age was probably like 13, 14. And after we performed, like the kids, like all these kids, they wanted pictures with us.
Of course they did.
I felt like I was like a drag race queen with and I was like, and I could tell, like some of the boys especially, I could tell they probably might have been gay.
Yes.
And it was like them getting to see us as adults living our authentic life.
There's something to be said about an open, queer adult showing their true colors to a group of young, questioning youths.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things that a friend of mine wants is he wants me and also Tony to potentially come out for like a conversation with the school's Gay Straight Alliance, which it's called the GSA. They've been doing that since I was in high school.
Right. Not when I was in high school.
Not when you were in high school.
Nope.
I wish that was a thing for you in high school.
Yes.
I wish I was a part of that thing in high school, but unfortunately, I was still figuring myself out when I was in high school.
The only gay straight alliance in my high school was if you were
the
gay,
locker room.
you got pushed into a locker.
Oh,
basically, yeah.
I'm too big to fit in a locker.
Fortunately for you, I am petite.
You are petite.
I am petite.
You are petite. I've seen the baby pictures.
Here's the thing. What people don't understand. We are not trying to indoctrinate kids to become LGBTQIA+.
Never.
I mean, a kid knows, or a kid has questions. Maybe they don't. Maybe, a kid, maybe they know right, out the womb what they are. And they're confident in that. But there are kids, and like when I was a kid,
yes,
I knew I was different.
Yes.
Didn't know what it was.
Yep.
But I knew.
Yep.
Whatever it was.
Yep.
It was bad.
Yep.
Because everybody around, anytime I ever leaned into that territory, I was like, "You can't do that. That's for girls. That's what girls do.
Yep.
What are you, a sissy?"
Yep.
And what they don't understand is, we're not trying to indoctrinate children. There's no.
I've no desire.
No desire to indoctrinate children. However,
children will learn.
They're going to learn regardless.
They're going to learn regardless. Have we not learned anything from Into the Woods?
I never saw Into the Woods. So what do I have to learn?
You need to watch Into the Woods.
I guess I need to watch Into the Woods.
It is one of my favorite Sondheim musicals.
Okay.
That and A Little Night Music.
All right.
But the song goes, "Careful the things you say, children will listen."
Mm-hmm.
And it really is a beautifully told story. I cannot recommend it enough to you. Like, watch it on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
You can watch the original Broadway cast with Bernadette Peters and
Well, I do love Bernadette Peters.
Oh, who doesn't love Bernadette Peters?
Bernadette Peters.
And unfortunately I cannot think of any of the other members of the cast.
Not as important.
No one is as important as Bernadette Peters. But I cannot recommend it enough to you. Like, children are going to learn the way they're going to learn. That was what happened to me. I learned in two places. I learned on the internet and I learned in college.
Right.
Like, I was not indoctrinated. I just went to a school where you learned about these things.
Right. And I told you,
yes,
when I was a kid, if someone had just said to me, which is a lot of kids now, if they're fortunate to have accepting parents, the parents will say to them, well, some boys like girls, some girls like boys, some boys like boys, and some girls like girls. And that's it. If like I had that in my life, somebody just saying, oh, if you're a boy and you like boys, it's okay. I didn't need like a sexual component to that.
Yep.
Because
right.
I this is probably like before puberty, really.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that I knew I was attracted to boys.
Yep. And
it was like if somebody had just said to me, "Oh, you like boys? That's okay.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with that."
Yep.
That would have been like
it would have been a different.
It would have changed my life.
A lot of things.
It would have changed my life.
It would have changed a lot of things.
And
it's it's very.
And let's face it, for the most part, most gays were coming from straight parents. It's changing now. I mean, a lot of LGBTQ.
They're adopting. They're doing in vitro
and things like that.
They're doing all these things.
But the majority of us, we're born of straight liaisons.
Yes.
Yes. So I mean,
it's unfortunately one of those things where we as people have more power if we work together.
Mm.
Because what we're seeing is a division brought about by fear, by
ignorance,
and that's like fear and ignorance.
Yeah,
those are the dividing factors with most of these, political arguments.
Yeah. Not to mention the self-loathing homophobe.
Oh, correct.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
Like, it really is upsetting because we are stronger together. And it really, it really frosts my cookies when, I'm watching Tucker Carlson be as divisive as he is on Fox News. And please note, I do not engage in Fox News, but I have family members who do.
Oh.
And some of them are going deaf, so of course I have to overhear it.
Oh, God.
And it's just...
I'll give you the number for earworks.
Please and thank you. So it really is unfortunate that this is where we're at, where a drag queen is viewed and looked upon as more dangerous than an AR-15 assault rifle.
Yes.
I mean, for me personally, the most dangerous thing on a drag queen is their mouth.
I would think they're glitter.
Well, that too. And their heels.
Their heels.
And their heels.
Especially if they break.
Yeah.
The
Hell hath no fury like a drag queen that's got a broken heel.
Corset can hurt too.
Well, that's a weapon that we, put on ourselves.
Yes.
So now that we're going to be taking that off and beating people with it.
Yeah, really. Well, I mean, you probably could use it like, a giant
slingshot. Oh my goodness. So, this was something that's affecting this is something that's affecting the voiceover community. So to those unaware, Crunchyroll and Funimation have two of their main headquarters in Texas. And Sony, the parent company of Crunchyroll and Funimation, have made it so that those studios cannot accept talent from outside of Texas.
You're kidding.
I kid you not.
Why?
Money, legal matters, I don't know. But there are a bunch of actors that are happy that it is exclusively to Texas, and there are a lot of actors that are not happy.
Sure.
Because Texas has become so red.
Right.
And when I say it's become so red, I mean the people in power have just been really taking advantage of their power there. Yeah. And they have made being queer, being trans, being anything within that umbrella of that rainbow umbrella. Yeah. The Texas governors, the Abbott and who's the other one?
Cruz.
Abbott and Cruz. They have made life a misery for people in Texas, an absolute misery. Yeah. So. To those that are trans that are in Texas, I am vehemently sorry that this is your reality. Yeah. It should not be. And to the drag performers in Texas, I commend you for sticking it out. There were people that came up to me and be like, "You're my hero. I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing." And I'm like, I'm only on Long Island. Yeah. We're only on Long Island. We're not in these really, really... I mean, granted, Long Island is becoming more and more conservative. Yeah. But also, it's still far more liberal than Texas. Oh, yeah. Still far more liberal than Texas. And
I mean, could you imagine living in
absolutely not.
Being the only gay person in a really small redneck town? That's got to be really hard.
When me and my family were discussing the idea of moving, because we needed to move into a bigger house, my parents were like, "Let's move to Texas. Let's move to Texas." And I'm like, if you guys are moving to Texas, I am not coming with you. I will not be moving with you. I will find someplace else to live. Right. I will find another person to live with. Right. I cannot live in a state where I am viewed as problematic and less than. Right. Now, granted, you can live in Dallas. You can live in any of the big cities. True. But as long as there is jurisdiction that puts my life in jeopardy and puts a target on my back, absolutely not. Yeah. Absolutely not.
No. I don't blame you.
So, that's my...
That's your story?
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Sticking to it.
That's the story. That's the story of Morning Glory. Oh, my goodness. Well, This was definitely an interesting episode of Maude.
Yes. Usually our review takes the whole hour, but it did not.
But it did not this time. It took about a half an hour, which,
I know.
only stands to reason. Because, again, there really wasn't anything...
It was a very fluffy episode.
Very fluffy
There weren't any real meaty issues.
No.
I think,
No, I think the writers were definitely hitting their stride with the, like, quote-unquote situation comedy. And also, when you have a character like Nell Naugatuck, who's just this bombastic, over-the-top, eccentric character, like, you can take her literally anywhere. Whereas with, like, Florida or even Victoria, you can definitely take those characters to another place because you have the race relations.
Right, yeah.
So
yeah, you didn't have that with
you don't have that with Mrs. Naugatuck, so you definitely have a little bit more fancifulness.
Yeah. Very true.
So we thank you so much for listening.
We do.
To our little God'll Get You for That podcast. And if you would like to hear us more, you can hear us where all podcasts are found. You can follow us on Instagram at Findlay's Friendly Appliances and YouTube and Facebook at God'll Get You for That Walter.
Correct.
And where all podcasts are found. Where can they follow you?
Everywhere. That's Toni Homeperm. And of course that's Toni. You're drinking water, so you
Toni
can't
with an I.
Toni with an I.
I was going to try gargling, and I'm like, nope, don't do that.
You missed your cue. Toni with an I.
Toni with an I.
Toni with an I.
Oh my goodness. And you guys, of course, can find me where all that Tomcats are found, traditionally on street corners.
True.
Very true. And we thank you so much for listening, and you will hear us on another episode of God'll Get You for That, Walter. Bye, guys.
Good night.